All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's episode of Roundabout Sports presented by Interstate 70 Sports Media, as well as by Harsh Construction LLC, with over 50 combined years of experience for all of your home renovation and outdoor needs. I'm the Maestro, Jeremy Carpet, alongside me here on a hot, oh my God, it is so sweaty and hot outside. Oh, it is July 23rd, 2025, but the one and only Mr. Plastastic himself, Scott Plaza, is joining me this evening. Scott, how are you, buddy?
Oh, we are, moving right along after watching this miserable Cardinals series here, but we're going to keep on keeping on. We got some more games to go, and hopefully we'll see things going in the right direction here shortly.
Yeah, what's interesting is there was a lot of hope this morning, and you were on the ball reporting it. We had talked about this last night after believe it or not, another sad Cardinals loss. And Erick Fedde had another terrible performance. In fact, over his last 12 starts, Fedde is 0-7 and has a 9.84 ERA over his previous 8 outings. Well, the Cardinals finally realized that, hey, we can't trade him anywhere because he doesn't have any value as far as getting players or prospects. So what do? We DFA him, and that's exactly what they did this morning. Scott, kind of take me through your thoughts on all of that.
Yeah, well, the part of the DFA that makes it the timing interesting is that we're about a week away from the trade deadline, and when someone is DFA'd, as they did with Fedde, that gives the team 7 days before he is either claimed by another team that they could offer a trade or pick up his salary. After 7 days, if nobody picks him up, then he could either go down to AAA Memphis, or the Cardinals could just outright release him and eat the remaining about $3 million on his contract. With Fedde's veteran presence and the amount of time he's been around, it's unlikely that he would accept that assignment down to Memphis, which is, that doesn't do the Cardinals much good for him to be down in Memphis anyway, even though they constantly talk about their lack of starting rotation depth, which is why they decided to relegate Michael McGreevy down there for so long. So kind of putting him in this 7-day window tells the rest of the league, like, hey, here's your last chance to get him. This is like your exclusive negotiating window with just the Cardinals. And it's probably, if anybody claims him, it's going to result in that team taking on maybe a portion of his salary, or the Cardinals getting a low A-level lottery ticket prospect in return. But this is kind of the Cardinals' last-ditch effort to try to get some value back from Fedde after they kind of missed the boat earlier in this season.
And, a lot of us held out hope that this would work. And I think a lot of the reasoning behind that is, honestly, when you look at it, Erick Fedde, of course, ever since the Cardinals DFA'd Tommy Pham, Fedde was the last piece of the Tommy Edman trade that was still with the Cardinals. And meanwhile, Tommy Edman proceeds to win an LCS MVP, win the World Series last year with the Dodgers, and here we are with no Fedde and no Pham. My question for you is, from the perspective of, I guess you could say from the Cardinals' perspective, do you think John Mozeliak is kicking himself for trading Edman, or did he feel like at the time this was necessary to help our team compete best long term?
Yeah, recency bias and hindsight is playing a lot of role here on Cardinals Twitter, with talking about how could this trade happen. It's Edman for Fedde straight up. And I had gone back to the announcement of that trade on Twitter and just seeing the amount of Cardinals fans saying, what a great move. This is phenomenal. Edman hasn't played all year. Fedde's the best pitcher available. And I agree with that. I was part of that. I said at the time, Edman hadn't played. He was kind of redundant on the roster. He was going into his contract year. And they made the deal that everyone felt that they needed to make. And even Tommy Pham coming back at the time was seen as, hey, there's that potential impact bat. He hits a home run early in his his comeback with the Cardinals, and it seemed like everything was moving in the right direction. But then, of course, the rest of the season kind of flamed out. Edman goes on to have his NLCS playoff run that put him into the MVP conversation there. And then where I think I'm still okay with this move is that the Dodgers signed Edman to a 5-year, $74 million extension.
Right.
And that's something that the Cardinals weren't going to do. So at least they received major league talent in return to fill the need that they had. And Edman, he had that incredible start to the season. But if you look at what he's doing now, his numbers are well within or below where the Cardinals starting lineup is as far as OPS and WRC plus and all that stuff. So it's not like he's lighting the world on fire. And I really don't know where he would play in this team right now, especially with the team that is already having a logjam at other spots with Arenado staying and a lot of the outfielders having to move around, Brendan Donovan, Nolan Gorman. Like there's still really not that spot that Edman would take. So I think still, I said at the time, and I'll stick to it now, is that it was the right move at the time. The move that we should probably be upset with Mozeliak here, where you're saying, is he kicking himself? It's probably looking at this offseason where it didn't really look like they were going to compete. They kind of mentioned it was going to be a transition, and it didn't seem like they ever really shopped Fedde, where his value was pretty high. He's only making, I think, $7 or $9 million or something this year. So going into the season, there was definitely going to be interest around the league. But once it did not happen and they did not trade him, I was all for it. I was kind of going back and forth with Brendan Schaefer on this over on Twitter, who's been really good covering all this stuff, along with the rest of the Cardinals media with posting this information. But it was the fact that they didn't pull the plug sooner or try to trade him when they realized he was going in the wrong direction. Start the season with him, sure, see what they had. But then when they found out that the value wasn't going to be there for the Cardinals, they should have, at that point, again, hindsight is playing a major role here, tried to find some type of value or return for him there.
And, this is something that I had told Brendan, and yes, great friend, great journalist, and the Cardinals media has been really good being on top of everything regarding all the news that's going around. And one thing that really stuck out, you bring up a good point about not trading Fedde soon enough and before his value got worse. And I think the Cardinals had this blind hope that we're going to keep putting him out there. Obviously, McGreevy was the smarter choice to put in that rotation spot over him. But if you know you're not bringing back somebody next year, you're going to want to try to trade him. To do that, you got to prove to the other 29 teams that, hey, this guy's worth something. The problem is, and look, it is a total crapshoot. The problem is it did backfire. I personally think Fedde's last start should have been against the Cubs in Wrigley. After that, that probably would have been when I pulled the plug and said, hey, if we can, we'll try to trade him. If it doesn't work, then you DFA him or eat the salary, do what you got to do. But that's when McGreevy should have been called up.
Yeah, and that's when
that's just my opinion.
That's when we really started to see Fedde's confidence, and the mental side of pitching is so much. He doesn't go out there expecting to fail. He goes out there expecting to be a major league pitcher, going on the success that he had, becoming a top prospect, pitching overseas and bringing him back here. The not performing well, and this is coming from a pitcher who has plenty of times not performed well. It eats on you, especially as you continue to go out every 5 days, and you can try to say you're going to be blind to social media, you're going to mute out the noise, but the energy in the clubhouse is different, and we kind of saw that with Marmol's comments today, with McGreevy getting pushed in there, like, hey, that gives us a chance, it's an upgrade. When your manager says that, that's the ultimate kind of lack of confidence that goes with not only the team, but with Fedde himself. And I think that's when they really tried to kick the tires on trading him, see if anybody would bite on that value, then maybe give him one more start after that if nobody bit. But again, I think they just started this whole process just a little bit too late.
And you talk about the offseason. I think one of the other problems that did plague the Cardinals is that they didn't make any real moves this offseason. They made the least amount of moves, in fact, of all the teams in baseball. Signing Phil Matone, was the only move that they made. Don't get me wrong, he's done really well. If anything, and I put out there, he might also should be considered as a piece the Cardinals should trade. Because this is how I look at it. He's on a one-year deal. Helsley's on a one-year deal. Now, Scott, I'm going to pass this on to you. If you are one of the other 29 teams and you are going to trade away, or you're watching the Cardinals or any team trade away a piece, trade away a player on an expiring contract, do you say, why trade for him why not just wait until he becomes a free agent, especially if you know that they're not going to re-sign them? Like the Cardinals have made it clear they're not going to re-sign Helsley. Mm-hmm. So teams may not be as willing to trade for him because they'll say, well, what the heck? We'll just wait until he goes to free agency, then make the big splash.
Sure. And that's a definitely real thought for, I'm sure, some of those fringe teams, but those teams that are really looking to compete right now, they're always looking for that lockdown bullpen help. And even though Helsley has had a down year based on his franchise record-setting season last year, he's still got a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, wipeout breaking ball that can help somebody. Maybe it's not going to be in that ninth inning. And they also don't have to pay him the salary that he's going to take next year. They could really just take the true 2-month rental route, run him out there 3-4 days a week, and just know that they're not going to sign him either. And because of his struggles, the prospect capital or whatever the Cardinals are going to get back isn't as high as what it was going to be prior. The Maton one is very interesting, and I could see it being easier to trade him because of his $2 million salary, but also for the clubhouse because he's a new guy this year. He doesn't have the big relationships that Helsley, who's been with the organization since he's been drafted. Like, it means a lot more to trade a guy that's been around for a long time, even if it is a business decision with trying to, look towards the future. But it's like the Brewers trading Josh Hader, the Brewers trading Devin Williams. The clubhouse was very, very shocked at that, and they really were confused by what management was doing. But going back to the Maton, I think he should have been looked to be traded earlier. Again, just a little bit behind on all these things, as it looked like Helsley was going to be sticking around because of his decreased in performance, that decreased his return, but also the fact that he's a hometown guy. They have the opportunity to offer him a qualifying offer if they want to, which would be about $20 million or so. But it's a very real question of like you're asking, Jeremy, if teams are going to be putting out the prospect capital knowing that they could just have Adam here in a few months.
And, we're talking a lot about, and before we continue, folks, I do want to say you can find Roundabout Sports on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, Pocket Casts, iHeartRadio, anywhere else you can find and stream your podcast. And I want to give a shout out to our sponsor here, Harsh Construction LLC. Once again, over 50 years experience in home remodeling and renovations. Call for a quote today at 618-363-9818. This is the Maestro Jeremy Carp alongside Scott Plaza right now. We're talking about what's going on with the St. Louis Cardinals, and there's a lot of things going on, not many of them good. In fact, it's hard to find a good thing going on because I think, look, teams struggle. Teams do good, teams do bad. But the worst thing a team can do is give up. And maybe this is just from my point of view. Right now, it looks like the Cardinals have given up. And of course, if you say that to or if you ask any player or any executive that, they're going to say, no, of course we haven't given up. But that's also the standard quo answer. But this team looks demoralized. And, part of it is coming down to, I think, John Mozeliak's, we've already talked, this is his last year as president of baseball operations. Bloom's taking over next year. I don't know if they decided, hey, we're going to just focus on what we have with this transition year or what. But right now, the Cardinals, there came a point where they exceeded expectations. Mm-hmm. Let's not deny that. Like the Cardinals, and to me, they still have, because we expected them to do probably much worse on paper than where they're at. The problem is, I think over exceeding expectations can lead to laziness, because you'll be like, well, if we do bad or not make any moves, well, then it's okay because, hey, we exceeded the expectations where we would have already been. But no, you're supposed to go full steam ahead. And to me, instead of going full steam ahead, Scott, I feel like the Cardinals train is getting derailed.
Yeah, and this is something that I know a colleague I work with at Redbird Rants, Thomas Galvain, kind of pointed out the other day, is that, when the Cardinals were down early in the beginning of the year, you felt that they were going to come back. They had a lot of energy. There was such a deep lineup that this person is going to try to scrape something together, that they're not done until the end of the game. Now, that takes a lot out of a team. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of emotion. It wears you out. Now it just seems like once they're down early, they're going to stay down. And that's what we saw a lot in 2023 when they were down a few runs in the third, fourth, fifth inning. I mean, you could pretty much just chalk that game up as a loss. This team came out hungry, as Victor Scott II said, and they showed that with his energy. Wilson Contreras, who I still absolutely love as their energy guy. You could tell that he's even a little bit. I was watching before he got his last at bat in today's game. They showed him, and he's just kind of not checked out, but it just kind of seems like, well, here we are again. He's the guy that it kind of seems like is the engine of the offense. I called him the other day, and it takes a lot out of you to consistently be that energy guy. I was a basketball coach for a very short time, and it's much easier to hold a lead than to always have to come back. And the same thing goes in baseball. Like Jeremy, you said, it could lead to laziness, but it's much easier to protect that lead than it is to continuously have to crawl back every single game, every night, every inning, everything like that. So I think the team's just kind of worn out. Yeah, I know we're coming off the All-Star break and they play a game for a living and blah, 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 all that jargon. But it's exhausting to continuously have to fight, argue, beyond under the bright lights with millions of people watching you and thinking that you're not trying your best or thinking that you're ruining their parlay on purpose or things like that. I mean, you're consistently going to be watched, and under that gun, that it just get a little bit tiring. And this is a grind of a season. They're 100 games in, and it's about that time where they're hitting that speed bump.
You bring about the, going out there fighting every day. And millions of people watching. Brings me to my next thought. I think a lot of the reason the Cardinals are getting the flack they're getting is because they're the Cardinals. Mm-hmm. I feel if this was the Marlins or if it was the Orioles, even, I hate to say it, even the White Sox, it wouldn't be as big a deal. But because it's the Cardinals, mm-hmm. a team that's literally known by even the most casual sports fans as the standard of what excellence is supposed to be, seeing them at 51-50 and getting shut out by a team that did not shut out a team in 220 games. We do a segment here every week, and it's my favorite segment of the show, called Just How Bad Do the Colorado Rockies Suck? And I told Brendan Schaefer, I said, look, we're about to lose this series, and it's going to be awkward as hell tonight doing this segment. Because here we are. I would love to say just how bad the Colorado Rockies are, for the sake of, the fun of it. But the thing of it is, the Cardinals just lost 2 out of 3 to them after getting swept by the Arizona Diamondbacks. The White Sox, the Chicago White Sox, last year they finished 41-121, which is the modern day record for most losses. And the Cardinals lost the series to them they faced last year. Well, the Rockies are 26-76, and they're still on pace to break the White Sox record. And yet they once again took 2 out of 3 from the Cardinals. They say you're supposed to play up to your opponent. we've seen the Cardinals beat the Dodgers at Busch this year. You and I were literally there when Arenado walked it off.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are a month and a half later, and we're being shut out by the Colorado Rockies. We don't know what happened, except the team just slowed down. They were riding a hot streak of momentum. They were the hottest team in baseball at one point. And it all tapered off. And you would think the All-Star break was the perfect chance for them to regroup, refocus, figure out these rotation issues. Because the rotation's been a mess all year. Mm-hmm. Palante struggled. Don't get me started on what Fedde and Michaelis have done. Liebertor has done pretty good. And Sonny Gray is having a pretty good year as well. But the struggles overall are what's masking any solid performances from these guys. And now here the Cardinals are. They're in fourth place. They're just one game over 500. And, you take a look at their schedule ahead, and it's not going to get any easier. I know they are playing the Padres. I know, give me 1 second. Yeah, they're playing the Padres. They're playing the Marlins. And you could say, but it's the Marlins. We don't know, though. We just saw what happened against the Diamondbacks and Rockies. So quite frankly, I have no idea what the Cardinals are going to do the rest of the year, but I do know that they need to do something before the trade deadline, or it's going to be a rough last 2 months of this season.
Yeah, I was really hoping that today's news, and this is all whatever to Fedde. I never cheer for anybody to lose their job. I never vouch for anybody to have that stuff. But it just came to the point where it was time. He took it like a professional. He had some great quotes, unfortunately, saying, he tried. He was doing what he needed to do, trying to be better. It just didn't play. It just didn't work out that way. But you hear, again, Marmol and Contreras saying, hey, great timing for McGreevy to come in. It gives us a chance. I was hoping, after you're hearing the same team, the team, and I'm sure the players are kind of like us, where they're waiting to see if management's going to make a change. And Contreras has said that himself. I don't know what management's going to do, but this is what I would want to do. Which I, again, love Contreras' energy and speaking out like that. But, after the team's watching Fedde go winless since his complete game, like, they're probably sitting there waiting to hear something different. Yeah. And then when it doesn't happen, like, that kind of takes the energy out of the room as well. I can speak to this. My first year in pro ball, I had an over 7 ERA. I'm sure nobody was happy to see me take the ball. And I hope there wasn't a celebration when I was released, but it makes sense. Then I took it like, I didn't give the team a chance to win. That's what everybody has to do in that opportunity, is give a team the chance to win. And unfortunately, Fedde hasn't been able to do that. Palante hasn't been able to do that much either. And Michaelis, Michaelis is Michaelis. I got my own thoughts about just that whole situation. With Michaelis as a pitcher, as a whatever, he's a completely different thing. But, seeing Michaelis, Fedde, and Palante continue to go out and not give the team the chance to compete, to do something, to battle back, to even get a lead. The offense has been struggling, but the offense can't be expected to put up 6, 7, 8 runs 3 out of every 5 games. And then if those 3 games that go as we expect, then that puts more pressure on Sonny Gray. It puts more pressure on Matthew Liberatore to be that stopper, where they're facing more likely than not the other team's top starter as well, to where that puts more pressure on the offense to score runs early, puts more pressure on the pitchers to keep the games close. It's just a lot of stuff going on that we as fans don't think about, because we're like, again, they're playing a game. But when you're high-level athletes, you want to perform, you want to play well. All of these people in the major leagues were probably the best player on their team growing up, through high school, through wherever they got drafted, wherever they got chosen from. They were likely the best team that was their best player that was used to winning. And when that doesn't happen at the game's highest level, it takes a lot on you as well. So, it's just a lot of an energy, mindset, mental state that, 162 games, as the cycle keeps going, where it's struggling. It's a 4-game win streak followed by a 6-game losing streak, followed by what Jeff Jones pointed out today is that, let me make sure I have it right, is that the Cardinals and the Nationals are the only teams to have dropped series to both
Yep.
the 2024 White Sox and the 2025 Rockies. That's just telling you that this is just not where we need to be. Marmol said after the game it's the worst game they've played all year. And unfortunately, it came against such a bad team that it really inflated that. And now we see Busch Stadium at 60% capacity on a good day right now. I'm nervous for what it's going to look like at the end as the season progresses. Fans all say they're ready for it to blow up. We're ready for the transition. We're ready for the rebuild. But I still don't think they realize that a transition and rebuild means that there's going to be losing. If they're upset about losing now, why is losing on purpose going to convince you that things are getting better or that you should come back to the ballpark? And that's where I always try to shy away from a rebuild. The Cardinals haven't had to do it. They've had so much success since Mozeliak's been up, that they haven't had to go over this true rebuild, that I don't know how the city of St. Louis and the fans are gonna take it as the Cardinals go 10, 15, 20 games under 500 next year. You said earlier that there's no excitement or anything really going on or no good news. There's JJ Weatherholt sitting in Memphis and hitting the absolute cover off the ball right now. Yeah, he's exciting. He can probably compete for this team right now. He won't because of service time stuff. It would be, a September call up at the earliest, if it even happens this year. But then we're going to be watching this exciting player be on a team that's not competitive. So then it becomes, are we wasting JJ Weatherholt's time? And then what does that relate? Or does that speed up the timeline to say, hey, we can't waste JJ Weatherholt's time. Let's start spending. There's so many question marks in this rebuild. I'm up in the Chicago area. I saw the Cubs rebuild come into a championship in 2016, but then I've also seen the White Sox rebuild since 2005, and they're in another rebuild right now. So there's no guarantee that a rebuild's going to work. So I'm just nervous for what that actually means for the team, organization, and the city.
And it's funny that you bring up JJ Weatherholt, because right now he's hitting 360 down in Memphis after hitting 300 up down in Springfield. They gave him the call up, and he's already hit in 7 games. He's hit 2 home runs, 3 RBIs, got 9 hits total, 9 runs scored. And my big thing with Weatherholt is he's obviously going to be a franchise cornerstone for this team. That's what they're building him up as. That's what they're planning ahead. As we get to the trade deadline next week, here's the question, though. And I said him especially, but maybe Donovan, is JJ Weatherholt the only untouchable player on the Cardinals, in the Cardinals organization right now as far as trading? Is everybody else on the table for the right price?
I think that's a very realistic thing outside of, of course, their draft picks. Liam Doyle looks very, very exciting, and he could have a very fast rise to the majors. But I don't want to say that Mason Wynn is untouchable. I personally would treat him as an untouchable piece, but he hasn't taken off offensively. I still think he's going to. I think I see a 750 plus OPS player. Like a potential. I chose him to be a 2020 guy this year. That doesn't look like it's going to happen, as he's been battling some injuries and hitting leadoff, hitting second, hitting sixth, hitting ninth, hitting eighth, all these spots in the lineup. But I'm going to say that if someone were to be untouchable that's on the major league roster, Mason Wynn would be that guy in that premium position, with Weatherholt potentially having defensive questions of sticking at shortstop. He's played there consistently since being drafted, with a little bit of time here at second base. But it seems like they're kind of breeding him to be a shortstop and maybe work on the position change later. I hear Ivan Herrera's name being put on a lot as untouchable. As of right now, he's kind of positionless. He's not going to be a catcher unless he undergoes some crazy transformation or stuff this offseason. I don't know if they're going to try to do that again, but then there was news he was trying out in the outfield, which fits their right-handed outfield needs that I've kind of been pining for over on social media and stuff as well. But who knows if that's going to work. Jordan Walker is a question mark. As far as untouchables, I think JJ Weatherholt and Mason Wynn might be my 1 and 2. Quinn Matthews is on that border, but he's really struggled this year coming back from the shoulder injury. He's walked as many guys as he walked all of last year when he led the minor leagues with 200 plus strikeouts and was named the Cardinals pitcher of the year. There's just a lot of needs that they probably don't have the answers to currently in the organization.
Well, I take a look at, the players that can be considered. I consider right now Weatherholt and possibly Brendan Donovan as the untouchables. Now, a lot of people will counter that, and they have, and I understand the fair assumption that, look, Donovan's the hottest hitting Cardinal right now. Why wouldn't you trade him? He's the one you would maximize your value for, which, once again, like I said, fair assumption. Right now, there's 3 notable Cardinals that have no trade clauses. Nolan Arenado, Wilson Contreras, and Sonny Gray.
And Miles Michaelis,
Miles Michaelis. As far as ones that would most likely get traded, right. But I get it. So we got 4, and Gray and Contreras have expressed their desire to stick around here. That they're going to stay. They want to stay with the Cardinals. Arenado, we know all the stories. The clause was there was or they were trying to get him to waive his clause for a trade to Houston. It didn't work out. Mozeliak's addressed this multiple times. And Mozeliak has even said he will talk to Arenado again about the no trade clause to see if he will waive it, depending on, what we got going in this final week. And keep in mind, there is, I love, if one of the best moves the Cardinals have done this offseason, in my opinion, was moving Contreras to first base. Mm-hmm. I think, Contreras has had a great season. And I like that this rests him up better, filling up the void left by Goldschmidt. You put Contreras at first so he doesn't have to wear down as a catcher. The whole thing with Herrera, I think the Cardinals have a major catching situation. They need to figure out who can lock down that catcher spot. I don't even know if they have I think Jimmy Crooks is going to be that guy eventually, but we might be looking at 1 or 2 years before that could happen. So you're trying to figure out the right nows while thinking about the years ahead. And I think that's something that Mozeliak actually has addressed to us in the past, was that, it's not just looking at the right now. It's about looking at the future ahead and planning everything that you can as, ahead of a baseball organization. And I'm looking at the Cardinals. There's a lot of good pieces in place for a strong future. I think a lot of the good bats have just had very off years. Mason Wynn is a perfect example. Mason Wynn, to me, can also be another cornerstone on this team. But once again, like you said, you expected him to go 2020 this year. Probably not going to do that unless he has a big late summer surge. I'm still on the Nolan Gorman train of where I think he can fill key pieces in when need be, and a great bat off the bench. Now, I wanted to ask you this. What are your thoughts on we hear all different Cardinals, their potential on being traded. One big name that's come to a lot of people's mind is Lars Nootbaar. Take me through the process of potentially trading Nootbaar, and what do you think the Cardinals, would be able to get for Nootbaar? At this point, he's 27, but right now, yeah, he's got 12 home runs and 37 RBIs, but he's only hitting 227. And I know that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows and concerns for the other teams that could be in the market for an outfielder.
Yeah, before I get to the Nootbaar, I want to touch on the Arenado and the catching stuff that you talk about, because I think those are just awesome conversations to consistently have. And I see Arenado as more valuable to the Cardinals than he would be elsewhere at this point in time. One of the other things that I have to keep reminding myself about Arenado is that he's not on an expiring contract. He's got this year, next year, and another year at with about $27 or so million a year. So if they don't trade him this year, there's the opportunity to see if they don't get the return that they want, or he doesn't want to waive that no trade clause to Houston again, as their Isaac Paredes is down with an injury. If he doesn't want to waive it again, they can try again in the offseason as they hopefully actually pick a direction. And maybe Arenado sees, you know what, I don't want to spend my last 2 years here. I'll widen that trade list. And then the other teams, it would hopefully create a little bit more interest. I was all for keeping Arenado if they didn't get the return. You don't just give away a third baseman that's potentially a Hall of Famer, a perennial Gold Glover, an all-world defender, and things like that. He just, again, hasn't hit the way that he's needed to lead the team. But I don't think the return is going to be anything that you need to try to trade him in the next week. Here, I get that they're going to try, and I would try as well, but there's the potential to test this again in the offseason. For the catching situation, I think it's an amazing, intriguing, and just a great conversation to keep having. I'm also writing with Viva Alberto, so if you want to check me out over there. I just did a deep dive into whether Pedro Pages or Jimmy Crooks should be traded. I'm off the Pages train. I was in this year with the 60-40 split of Herrera and Pages, despite Herrera's lack of defensive capabilities. But then, of course, he goes down and gets hurt twice, and Pages has to take over. He's been constantly applauded for his ability to handle a pitching staff. But the numbers don't point to him actually being that quality of a catcher, as he has more pass balls, wild pitches, and less caught ceilings than he had all of last year in the same amount of playing time. And he's hitting in a mid 500 OPS, which is not going to get it done. Trading him would net very little in return, but it would clear up the opportunity for your guy and my guy, Jimmy Crooks, to make his debut now. Learn the game, see what the Cardinals have in him. He's another lefty bat, which is a potential issue I'm going to get into with Nootbaar here in a second. But he's looked to be every part of the catching situation here in the future. He's struggled a little bit at Memphis, but any offensive production that he can provide above what Pages is doing, and even if they're and how he can do on the defense, which he's been constantly receiving high marks for, give him the chance in this low stress environment, assuming that the Cardinals are kind of punting on this season. Let Jimmy Crooks come up, see what he can do, and then he goes into next year as the starting catcher. So then that kind of starts the evaluation period, because behind him you have the switch hitting Leo Bernal, who I am very, very excited about. I've covered him a few times. That could happen there. And then there's also Rainiel Rodriguez, who we heard Mo talk about at Blogger Day, and many, many other people. Kyle Reese, the Redbird Farmhands, all those people on Twitter are just all over his power potential, and he's only 18 hitting moonshots. It's time to thin out that catching room and see what they have. Pozo is great. He's fun. I enjoy watching him. He's obviously not the future behind the plate, but having him as a backup or something as well is nothing hurt there. Okay, now to get to the actual question that you asked with the Lars Nootbaar, I definitely think Newt is somebody that can be interesting in a trade, but it might not happen this year again, as he's on the IL with his left rib cartilage separating from his breastbone or something, injury. And the most recent update is that he's still unable to swing without pain, which we're 8 days away from the trade deadline. Nobody's going to be trading for that in this current state of questions where his health is. And he's been a guy that's consistently missed time. I was on the team of giving him the full starting position to see if he could stay healthy, because all of his previous injuries were from freak accidents, diving, sliding, whatever. And now this year, who even knows where that's coming from. But like you said, he's struggled. He's hitting 220. He has 12 homers, which is sadly second best on the team. But I think he is going to be a potential surplus. The Cardinals have a ton of left-handed hitting outfielders. You got Donovan, who's slotting in there, Burleson, who came on after a terrible start, who's getting DH, who's getting outfield time with Herrera kind of mixing in. And then you have Victor Scott, then you have Matt Koperniak, then you have Michael Ciani, then you have Nathan Church, then you have Joshua Baez. They all hit from the left-hand side, and they all play the outfield. There needs to be some type of, again, trimming the fat for the needs, especially if Jordan Walker doesn't take off, which I am excited again. I'm buying into Jordan Walker again. He had some
I am too. I'm excited.
He had some great at-bats in Arizona that he hit a 425-foot double. He hit another 418-foot double. Like, they would have been home runs elsewhere. But if he doesn't take off, then next in line is, again, another left-handed outfielder. So I think there does need to be some trimming of that surplus outfield position, and I think Nootbaar could potentially be that spot. The return isn't going to be anything spectacular, but again, it does free up opportunity for other people.
It's a very, you know what, sometimes having too much of a good thing, too many of one thing is a good thing. The Cardinals do have a lot of great depth. I think a lot of people think the Cardinals have lost their way when it comes to developing. I think the Cardinals' problem has been developing over the past few years, but I don't think drafting has been the issue. I think the Cardinals have drafted a lot of very good prospects and potential players for their big league roster. It does just come down to the development of them. And, I take a look at a lot of the bats that you brought up, and Reniel Rodriguez and Josh Baez especially. Josh Baez has had a fantastic past few weeks as well. And there's a lot of great young players that are working their way up in the Cardinals organization for, the upcoming years. And you know what? I think one point I really liked is when you said for Nolan Arenado, for a veteran like Arenado, how a veteran like him would mean more for him being in St. Louis than if he were with another team. And it makes sense, because I feel like when he's with the Cardinals, he's that guy. He's that leader, that main person that people think of and focus on. Whereas if he were on, I hate to say it, but let's just say the Dodgers, he's just another guy on the Dodgers.
He's hitting 7 or 8 on the Dodgers.
Yeah, he's hitting 7 or 8, whereas with the Cardinals, he's the heart of the order. And, he's still that big bat. And he's still an elite defender. We can say what we want, but for 35 years old, or I'm 34 years old, going on 35, Arenado is still having a really good season. 10 home runs, 43 RBIs. Hitting 241, but I also think the averages as a whole, I'm not going to say are inflated. I think they don't tell the whole story. I think everybody average-wise on the Cardinals for the most part has regressed. But I also think that there's a lot of room to bounce back. And Jordan Walker, to me, he was a product of the past 2 years of being bounced up and down from the minors to the big league roster. And when you do that, you really hinder one's development.
And that's along with
And
moving him to a new position as well, while
that's
also
true.
adjusting to
Yes.
major league pitching, while trying to adjust his swing. Like, we forget that he hit 280 with like an 11-game hit streak or something when he came up,
Yes.
but then he was demoted because he hit too many ground balls. I would love some Jordan Walker 100-mile-an-hour ground balls for singles and doubles. But I'm going to interrupt this live stream with some good news that JJ Weatherholt just hit a leadoff home run down with Memphis as we were talking.
Ooh,
So
okay. I'll take it.
he's ready.
You know what's funny? With Jordan Walker, um, and look, you've played baseball. I only played baseball like backyard rec, whatever. But to me, I feel like changing your swing is one of the worst things you can do because that's what got you to where you were at in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think you can make adjustments on where at the plate or what stance maybe, but I don't think you should change your swing. And I think that's, if they're trying to get Walker to change his swing, that's completely defeating the purpose of developing him to be an all-star.
That's a conversation that I had with the guys over at Redbird Rundown to start the year, which, again, welcome Redbird Rundown to I-70. Very excited to have you guys. But it was when the Cardinals had brought in Brant Brown, and how much weight did I put into coaches? I go back and forth. The swing change is something that is tough to get. Like you said, use what got you here. He was drafted out of high school with extreme power potential. He progressed quickly through the major leagues. He was probably rushed up there because of some injury stuff that happened during spring training. But completely changing, and that's where my answer to Matt and company over at Redbird Rundown was, I think they can teach approach, and they can teach how to prepare yourself for games and things like that. I remember early in the season, there was a picture circulating Twitter of, I don't remember who they were playing, but the Cardinals were playing at Busch Stadium, and the other team did a pitching change, and the entire dugout was huddled around Brant Brown looking at an iPad, seeing what they could learn about this pitcher. And everyone was riled up about that, saying how incredible that was. And that's something that I think coaches do make a difference. It's that the total mechanic issues. I'm very fine with, try out a leg kick or try out a hand position, but trying to change an actual path of the swing is pretty wild, because there's so much that goes into it that also then affects the timing. It affects the posture. It affects the confidence and all this stuff that goes into it when you start focusing on the way that your bat should move, as opposed to trusting your hands, trusting your reactions, trusting your eyes. And again, like you said, do what got you, become a first-round draft pick. Do what has made you successful. I'm coaching now, and a lot of my hints and tips and coaching spots are about the setup or the approach, as opposed to the actual swing itself. There might be some, again, just in timing or mechanical adjustments, but these people are successful and do things at a high level for a reason. And it comes to the point where you got to adjust to what they have and what you want to see, and try to find that kind of middle ground to find what works best, where all parties are happy.
And this was today was the sixth straight game that Walker started, and he started in right. He batted seventh, and before today he went 7 for 20 with 3 doubles, a walk, 2 runs, and 2 RBIs. And I think that's a pretty good line. I think he will be the clear-cut starter while both Nootbaar and Gorman are injured. And even then, even when Gorman returns, I think Walker's still going to be the starter. Mm-hmm. When Nootbaar comes back, I could see potentially either more of a platoon role, or at least, shifting back and forth between each other. Because the Cardinals, once again, they have a plethora of outfielders. Outfielders are not the issue on the Cardinals. There is a lot of them. But there's also a lot of infielders that can play the outfield on the Cardinals as well. They might try to move some of those guys in, or have some DH, in order to give Walker. If I'm the Cardinals, if I'm Ollie, and I'm in charge of this lineup, I'm keeping Jordan Walker in there for as long as I can and ride with the hot hand until obviously you give a player a usual rest day here and there. But I keep him in and I let him work on his mechanics because, I mean, look, we're not acting like Jordan Walker's this like aging veteran. Jordan Walker is literally, I believe, still just he's 23 years old. You know, the sky is still the limit for him. But this, to me, I said this at the beginning of the year. This year could very well be a make or break year for Jordan Walker. If not this year, next year. Because with a lot of prospects coming up, the big transition in power in the organization, you know, Jordan Walker is still that he needs to be the guy they want instead of the guy that could have been. And I think he's in the middle right now. And it's a very slippery slope if you are the St. Louis Cardinals when it comes to Jordan Walker.
And that's where I think they could potentially be so exciting. And I'm just trying to picture, you know, like walking down by Busch Stadium and you're seeing the banners and stuff and seeing their players, how cool it would be to see Walker, Wynn, Weatherholt, Victor Scott. You know, they're all in their low 20s. If they could all be the exciting players we expect them to be, I mean, just picture the four of them being the face of the franchise with Wynn and Weatherholt up the middle in the offense or in the infield, Victor Scott and Jordan Walker in the outfield. I mean, that could be really exciting for a long time. As you said, I think they're all 23 years old. I mean, that is like you said, the piece that's there. Herrera's young, Crooks is young, Bernal is young. They could potentially push to have that 26-year-old average starting lineup, but not have the look of a total rebuild where, again, in Chicago area, seeing the White Sox lineups of whoever they have, it's going to be way different to see the young Cardinals players in the lineups than it would be to see the Chicago White Sox starting lineup. So I think there's the potential for a quick transition. It's just going to be how Bloom is able to spend with the potentially limited finances that he's going to be given, just like Mozeliak was kind of handcuffed there. But then we're going to see that development to see if that reinvesting into that minor league system is going to pay off. But there's definitely a bunch of holes that they still need to fix that just aren't going to come from Memphis. The pitching is a big question. TK Roby, Tank Hence are constantly hurt. And then beyond that, you know, you got McGreevy. Great. Let's see what he does, but he's not this overpowering K guy. Gordon Graceffo looked to be a potential starter, but now they've stretched him out to be like a kind of put him in the bullpen to be kind of a lengthy reliever or potential closer. So the starting pitching is kind of where they're going to be kind of light here for the future, but that's what they did in the draft. They targeted those high-powered fastball starting arms that could potentially fill that with and I think the key word is going to be with cheap innings. Palante is still going to be in that initial rookie contract. Liberatore is still in that rookie contract. So there should be money to spend. It's just, are they going to be allowed to spend it?
I think that's the big $1 million question. You know, we're talking about the roster ages, you know, about how so many guys are still 23, you know, or 22 or 24. Despite that, the Cardinals have the fourth oldest roster in baseball at an average of 29.8 years old. I will say a big chunk of that comes from the pitching. Because I feel like the average age of the bats would probably be about 27, 28.
And that's got
maybe
Contreras and Arenado being in their 30s. So, I mean.
Exactly. And Donovan being right on that borderline. So, I mean, but yeah, Contreras and Arenado are the oldest. But the Cardinals have also just had the past two seasons an absolute surplus of, and I hate saying it like this because, you know, they're supposed to be innings eaters, but aging pitchers. And I think now, I don't know what. Let me ask you this: do you think there is specific reasons. I mean, Tink Hence has also been a very highly touted and hyped injury. I think that's one reason he had.
Uh-oh. Well, I am currently not hearing Jeremy, so if anybody who's kind of watching this right now can let me know if you're able to hear Jeremy or able to hear me. Drop a little comment in here so I can figure out what to do here next. If it's all right. Well, I'm thinking that it might be on Jeremy's side that we're seeing a little bit of a connection issue. So I'm going to just kind of keep this going. It looks like he just reached out to me. He's having a little bit of connection issues. It's a big question of what it is that we're trying to see with their direction. And I don't think we're going to get an answer to that direction this year because there's some big decisions that need to be made with whether it's going to be the money portion or the prospect portion of who's going to be around, who's not going to be around. So there's just a lot of questions that we're probably not going to get answered to right away. But Jeremy is back, so let's see and talk about.
Yep, I am back, and we had a massive. I will say, let me just double check that everything is. Yep, we are live and good. Okay, perfect. All right, welcome back, everybody. Technical issues over here on my end, just terrible Wi-Fi. It'd be like that sometimes. But what I was going to ask is, what are some of the reasons you think they haven't called up any of the young pitching prospects besides, like in Tink Hence's case, injury history?
I'll jump in here with a little bit of being facetious. To quote John Mozeliak, there's just not any room for him. As he famously said when McGreevy wasn't called up, because he said there just wasn't a spot in the rotation for him, when clearly there's some spot in the rotation for him. I think part of it is, Quinn Matthews looked to be the closest. He received a major league invite, but then after, going down with getting sent down in camp early, he had that shoulder issue. I think he would have had an opportunity, but, and this is again, that's something that's been going around social media, is that the entire Cardinals starting rotation has been healthy the entire season, which is something that teams would be dying to have. Unfortunately for the Cardinals, that meant that Miles Mikolas and Erick Fedde have been healthy all year. But typically a team is going to see multiple injuries to high-profile arms that they have to fill from somewhere. And in the Cardinals case, they haven't had to. Even bullpen-wise, they've been extremely healthy. Unfortunately, that means John King has been getting a lot of playing time as he continues to struggle and be on the roster, but just because there's nobody in AAA that can pitch from the left-hand side that is knocking on the door to be called up. The biggest reason, again, to answer your question, why don't we see any of these young guys? Ownership hasn't created that opportunity for them. And what was supposed to be that runway year, they talked to Sonny Gray. He said, no, thank you. Mikolas said, no, thank you. Fedde now is opening that spot for McGreevy. Liberatore, he's not going anywhere. So it's just trying to find where is that spot that those arms could come up. And right now it's just been in the bullpen with Graceffo, with Granillo, with Swanson. They've been the ones that have been riding the Memphis shuttle in the bullpen rather than having the opportunity to shine in the rotation.
Absolutely. As we wrap up here, Scott, first I want to thank you so much for being on this week. There's going to be a lot of coverage on all the platforms that you cut, all the sites, everywhere that you're about when it comes to the trade deadline. Let me ask you this last question before we close out the show. Who do you truly think the Cardinals are going to trade at the deadline?
If I had to choose one name And this is one that I wanted to get the opportunity in the rotation. They didn't give it to it. They gave it to Liberatore, which has worked out. I think Steven Matz is going to be the most likely to be traded. I do think Helsley and Maton will be at least shopped around. I do think there might be a position player here or there that gets sent out, but Steven Matz has showed he can be healthy. He showed he can be effective. He's still hitting 95, 96. He's pitched in a couple spot starts. He's pitched in some relief roles. I think his lefty capabilities and the ability to go deeper more than just one inning are going to be intriguing to the most amount of teams. That might drive the price up higher. It won't be near the return that they'll get from Helsley or Maton because of their late inning effectiveness and stuff like that. But I think Steven Matz could still net you a pretty decent return and is probably a likely arm to be dealt.
Okay. Well, Scott, tell us all where we can find all the amazing work that you do before I wrap us up this evening.
Sure thing. You can find me on Twitter and on Blue Sky. I am Mr. Plastastic 17, I believe. That's way back to college there. You can find me, of course, writing for Interstate 70 Sports. And then you can also find me writing with Redbird Rants, writing with Viva Albertos, and then posting instant post games on Twitter with the Baseball Banter broadcast. If you want to get my more of my reaction stuff, I try to post as much as often on Twitter with that, while also bringing my stuff over to Redbird Rants and Interstate 70. So drop a follow to all those places. I try to also respond as much as possible, because I hate when you try to connect with accounts and they just like it or things like that. I try to have that conversation. So if you drop me that follow, I'll more than likely follow back and try to keep those conversations going with you, because this is the stuff that I like to do. So Twitter, Blue Sky, Mr. Plastastic, and then Interstate 70, Redbird Rants, and Viva Albertos.
All righty, ladies and gentlemen, we are here to wrap it up on episode 140 of Roundabout Sports. First, I want to say you can find Roundabout Sports on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Pocket Casts, and anywhere else you stream your shows. You can also find us on the official YouTube channel for Interstate 70 Sports Media, where you can also find, soon you will find the Redbird Rundown podcast. You can find the Blues Fan Forum podcast, the Other Guys Sports podcast, and Issues with Wrestling with Christopher Miles. Also, be sure to find us on Facebook. You can find me on X at jcarpsportsfan1, and you can find Interstate 70 Sports Media on X as well. And as always, we close the show by putting up the NAMI helpline. For that, you dial 1-800-950-NAMI, 1-800-950-NAMI. The National Alliance on Mental Illness is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to building better lives for those who struggle with mental health issues. We also put up the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at the end of every show. And for that, you dial 988. The line is open 24/7, 365, 366 on leap years. Understand you're never alone in this world. There is always somebody out there who loves you, who cares about you, who wants nothing but the best for you. We all go through struggles every day, and it can be mentally taxing as well as physically and spiritually. Your feelings are always valid, and never let anybody make you feel otherwise. And you are just a phone call, a text message, an appointment away from perhaps that life-saving moment that you need. And you could also be the listening ears and watchful eyes for somebody else in need as well. Once again, I want to thank my dear friend Scott Plaza for joining me this evening. Be sure to catch us next week on Roundabout Sports. And until then, I'm the Maestro, Jeremy Karp. And always remember, life is a book full of empty pages just waiting to be written in. Make your lives worth reading. Good night, everybody.